There's a point where sunlight dies, where a cavern, dappled with light from the entrance, becomes a cave, an absolute silent blackness. At that boundary, two signs are posted underwater. One shows a diver symbol, crossed out. The other is a direct warning: stop, prevent your death, go no further. The dive leader swam past them, and four tourists, trusting him, followed into the dark. On the surface, another guide, Eduardo, realized something was terribly wrong. No time to wait for a rescue team. He grabs a full air tank, swaps it for his own, and descends back into the passage alone. Nearly 300 feet in, he finds Lisa Chin. Her regulator, the mouthpiece that delivers air from the tank, is floating uselessly beside her face. She isn't breathing. Her husband Thomas is right there, his own air gauge screaming empty. Eduardo forces his spare regulator into Lisa's mouth, sharing his own precious air, and begins the slow, terrifying journey, guiding them both back toward the distant light. He sends them to the surface, but he isn't done. He turns and re-enters the passage, a second time. 50 feet in, he finds Rebecca Williams. She's unconscious, her tank completely drained. He grabs her and makes a desperate descent. But her husband Mark is still missing. Eduardo returns to the darkness, a third time. He finds Mark floating, motionless. His tank is empty. In the crushing silence of the deep, there is no action that can restore breathing gas once it's gone. Some lines shouldn't be crossed. The warnings were there for a reason. The cave had already given its final, absolute answer.
It starts with a single slip. A man is exiting Citron Cave, following two friends through a tight, hourglass-shaped passage. He approaches on his hands and knees, lowering himself head first into a pit that makes a sharp 90-degree turn. He misjudges his grip. In that instant, his leg folds against his chest, and the rock walls pinch around him at their narrowest point. He's now completely upside down, pinned, with his head on the cold ground. Being inverted isn't just uncomfortable, it's a clock. Blood pools toward the head, pressure builds, vision blurs, thinking becomes unreliable. As the pressure becomes unbearable, his thoughts get confused, making self-rescue less likely with every passing minute. His friends try to pull him free, but in the tight space they have no leverage. Every pull just increases the pain and friction, wedging him tighter into the bend. After 20 minutes, they make a critical decision. They stop wasting effort, and one of them scrambles out to call 911. Help arrives in the form of Jerry Bowen, an experienced caver, and his son, Stephen. Stephen is smaller, so he's the one to go in. When he reaches the trapped man, he knows brute strength is useless. The solution isn't to fight the rock, but to change it. Stephen begins chiseling away at the passage wall, a dangerous task where any slip of the tool could be fatal. As time passes, the man slips further down, making the pinch point harder to reach. The rescue adapts. One person pulls from above, while Stephen pushes from below, trying to shift the leg into a better angle. Then, more chiseling. Finally, after removing the last bit of rock acting like a clamp, a combined push and pull pops his leg free. He emerges nearly 8 hours later with no serious injuries. The rescue worked because the team converted a no-exit squeeze into a changed geometry exit. But not all cave traps are a squeeze. At Culverson Creek Cave, a university student is exploring when a 500-pound boulder shifts and pins him. The problem isn't just the weight. The boulder is likely in a load-bearing position. Moving it the wrong way could trigger a larger collapse, crushing the student or blocking the only rescue route. Again, the confined space means no long levers, no mechanical jacks. Rescuers have to work in short, awkward motions. Their response is a lesson in control. They don't try to move the rock fast. They focus on tiny, incremental repositioning, small movements, followed by repeated checks for stability and coordinated pulling. They're trying to shift the boulder just enough to create a gap without letting it roll or drop into a worse position. It's a high-stakes geological puzzle. And sometimes, the trap isn't physical at all. On May 25, 2003, Chris Molyneux entered Ice Rink Cave alone to check if it was safe for his family. Following his map, he squeezed through an 18-inch high crawlway. On the other side, he kept walking, but the main part of the cave never appeared. He climbed over fallen rocks that weren't on his map, the first warning that his mental model and reality didn't match. When he decided to turn back, the entrance to the crawlway he'd used was gone, blocked by dirt and rock. He was lost. The cave hadn't pinned his body, it had trapped his sense of direction. These incidents reveal a fundamental truth about the world underground. It's an environment where survival isn't about power, but about precision. You cannot overpower a mountain from the inside. The only way out is to solve the puzzle it presents. One careful chisel strike, one gentle nudge, one correct turn at a time.
Fault Cave near Denver was known for its tight, dangerous passages. One section was so notorious it had been nicknamed the Crack of Doom. It had trapped people before. On March 21st, 1996, 3 people, Randy, Sam, and Eric, entered with basic gear and torches. It was Eric's first caving trip. This meant he was encountering the suffocating mechanics of a tight crawl for the very first time, not in a practice session, but under real life-threatening pressure. The Crack of Doom is a narrow, vertical slot in the rock. The critical failure happens when Eric tries to squeeze through and slips into a head-down position. In a squeeze like that, your body becomes a wedge. Once your hips and torso slide past a certain point, gravity and your own body weight become your enemies, pulling you deeper. The rock presses harder against your chest, your shoulders, your neck. The transcript of the event describes that with every movement, he became more stuck. Every attempt to wiggle out just increased the wedging force instead of reducing it. The pressure was closing in on his neck and head. His friends, Sam and Randy, desperately try to pull him out, but the geometry of the trap makes brute force useless. When someone is jammed head down in a slot this narrow, you can't get leverage on their center of mass. Any pulling force from above simply compresses their body against the rock, rather than lifting them out of the pinch point. It became so precarious that even breathing felt dangerous. The simple expansion of his rib cage could push his body harder into the stone, increasing friction and compression. Realizing they were helpless, Randy scrambled out of the cave to get help. He contacted a local caver, Jim Neely, who immediately began organizing a rescue team. By the time they arrived, Eric had been stuck for hours. His strength was fading. The longer someone is immobilized in a restrictive position like this, the more fatigue, cold stress, and panic amplify every problem. Breathing becomes more difficult. Decision-making falters. The team inspected the crack and made a critical call. They ruled out drilling. The risk of debris falling directly onto Eric's head was too high. They had to find a method that reduced resistance, not one that tried to break the rock and create new, unpredictable hazards. Their solution was pure physics, reduce friction, and reduce body bulk. First, they carefully removed Eric's clothes to eliminate any fabric drag against the jagged stone. Then, they began coating his body with Vaseline, methodically creating a low-friction layer so his skin could slide rather than bind. All the while, the clock was ticking. Hypothermia was a real threat in the cold, damp cave. The rescue had to be slow and careful. Rushing increased the risk of injury, but waiting too long increased cold stress and exhaustion. As the lubrication took effect, they saw his body start to shift, just slightly. It was proof that the friction barrier was breaking. They continued coating every inch of him they could reach, until finally movement became possible. With one final coordinated effort, the team slid him out smoothly. He was able to walk out with assistance, turning a no-exit squeeze into a survivable extraction. They didn't overpower the problem. They changed the one variable that mattered most, the inescapable resistance between rock and body.